Destiny. Um, didn't Jeremiah do a great job today? Let's give him a hand. I love when the worship team comes up and we get a lot of music, but I also love the acoustic. So thanks, Jeremiah. I appreciate that. I want to start out with a parable this morning. And this parable, Jenny Swink gets the credit for this parable. She gave it to me. So once there was this high school science teacher, and he was teaching a class, and he's lecturing to the class and saying, in the whole world, the largest mammal is the whale. And ironically, whales do not have large throats, so they cannot swallow adult human beings. And there was a sweet little high school girl in the class, and she raised her hand and said, "Teacher, the Bible says that Jonah was swallowed by a whale. Was Jonah swallowed by the whale?" And the teacher was a little bit exasperated, and he said, "Again, let me repeat. Largest mammal on earth is the whale. The whale has a small throat and cannot swallow a grown human being." And this sweet little girl said, "Well, I guess I'll just have to ask Jonah when I get to heaven." And the teacher was thoroughly frustrated and said, "Well, what if Jonah's not in heaven? What if Jonah's in hell?" And the girl said, "Well, then you could ask him." Now, I really like that story. It's really funny, but I'm a little uncomfortable with it. I get a little bit uncomfortable because it actually sets up as a kind of a snarkiness in that, you know? And it kind of sets up a hero and villain. The hero is this sweet little girl who believes in the Bible, who believes in miracles, and the snarkiness comes in with this high school science teacher who doesn't believe that Jonah was swallowed by the whale. Scientifically impossible. And so it's funny because he gets his comeuppance, but it kind of is snarky, this friend, enemy, this hero and villain in the story. And in our passage, there is a villain in this story. It's Matthew. He was hated by everyone. He was hated by the regular people, the tax-paying public, the Jews. Because he was kind of, as a tax collector for the Romans, he was kind of a reverse Robin Hood. You know, Robin Hood stole from the rich and gave to the poor. Well, Matthew stole from the poor and gave to the rich and powerful, the Romans. So Jewish people, the common person, hated Matthew. And you know what? So did his employers. The Romans hated Matthew. They despised Matthew. They used him. They profited from him, but they never trusted him. Because, really, if you turn on your own people, how can you ever trust them? And so, not only did the common people despise Matthew, but the Romans despised Matthew. And of course, the religious professionals, the pastors, the evangelists, the seminary professors, they hated Matthew because he interacted with these unclean Romans every single day. So he was ceremonially unclean. Couldn't go to the temple, couldn't go to the synagogue, no Bible studies for Matthew. He was definitely on the outside. So basically, our high school science teacher, a little bit of snarkiness, is the villain, but so was Matthew. He was despised by everybody except Jesus. And Jesus said two simple words: "Follow me." And it changed Matthew's life forever. I can just imagine, as our passage said, Matthew was so excited that night he threw a going away party for himself. And I love what one commentator said. One commentator said that Jesus was there at this party, right in the big fat middle of the beer bottles and poker chips. There was Jesus, totally at ease. I'm sure the disciples were not happy to be there. But they had signed up to follow Jesus, so there they were. The Romans weren't there. The religious professionals weren't there. Nobody else was there except for other despicables. The only friends Matthew had were other tax collectors and other dirty sinners. And I can just imagine Matt the next day. First full day as a disciple, he's on the road with Jesus. And can't you just imagine the conversations he had? Hi. My name is Matthew. Who are you? Pete, huh? Peter. Oh, okay. Hey, I saw you at the party last night. How'd you like that? Was pretty fun, wasn't it? How'd you like the main course? That beautiful trout, fresh, lemon, butter. I mean, just melted in your mouth, didn't it? What? Oh, you caught that fish. Oh yeah. And I took it from you as your tax. Yeah, well, yeah, I've changed careers now, and well, I'll catch you later, Pete. See you later. Oh, hi. My name is Matthew. What's your name? James. Hi, James. And who's this little guy? Oh, that's your little brother John. Hi, John. Hey, buddy. How you doing? You kind of familiar. Have we met before? Oh yeah, in court. Yeah, a couple of years ago, I sued you, didn't I? Yeah. I remember you paid your taxes that year, but I claimed that you didn't, and took you to court, and you had to pay them again, didn't you? And lawyers' fees and fine. And, hey, I'm really sorry. I'm a changed person. It's not me anymore. Okay, we'll circle back around and meet later. Okay. Hi. My name is Matthew. What's your name? Simon. Hi, Simon. Simon the what? Simon the Zealot? You're kidding, aren't you? Surely Jesus doesn't have any disciples who are zealots. You guys are terrorists. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. I know, you call yourselves freedom fighters. You hate the Romans. You fight against the Romans. You want to throw the Romans out. You kind of left-wingers, aren't you? Kind of these radical, wild-eyed liberals, aren't you? And I'm kind of surprised that Jesus would have you as a disciple. Well, yeah, I guess I am a conservative, law and order, support the empire, and really, I mean, Simon, really, the only thing we have in common is nothing, except maybe, well, I guess the boss. That's the only thing we have in common, isn't it? Well, yeah, I guess you're enough. I guess you're right. I guess that's enough. We have him in common. But by the way, my house is on the market. If you know a good realtor, please let me know. Okay. So, we'll see you later. Okay. But I think that's how kind of the conversation was. He was really a fish out of water with the other disciples. He was a despicable. And I am really good at having despicables in my life. I don't know about you, but been around a long time. I've got a lot of good practice on how to hate. And so let me go over some of the steps on how to hate. Because I'm really, really good at it. Now, I wanted to let you know, I've been a believer for over 50 years. So I'm really good at hiding this hatred. I'm really good at pretending to love my enemies. But, Becky can tell you, back home where there's no masks, it's the real me, she knows. So if you're strong and resilient, you can ask her after the service. And she'll tell you, I'm a really good hater. So let me give you 3 steps on how to hate. The first step is we catalog, and we categorize people and groups. Right? So, first of all, we start by cataloging ourselves. Let me give you an example. I am a white, American, male, middle class. Now, when I was practicing this, I kept saying middle age, and I knew that wasn't right, you know. Unless the median age is 140 years old, I'm not middle aged. So I'm really proud of myself for saying that right. So I'm middle class, white, straight, American male. So I catalog myself, and then I look at people who look like me and have the same background as me. And we have a shared history. So those are people that I can categorize as my people. Now, let me get now the interesting thing is, as a codicil, is that it's the same step. This first step is not only how we hate, but it's also how we love. Let me give you an example. In the next slide, I got a picture of a guy who used to be my hero, Lance, I can't even say his name, Lance Armstrong. Now, if you don't know about Lance Armstrong, I'm not going to waste, if you do know about it, I'm not going to waste your time explaining it, but you could look it up. Lance Armstrong. I even put his name up there so you can search him on the internet properly. But look at him. He's white, right? He's male. Believe me, he's straight, right? He rides his bicycle. Right? Now, he does it better than I do. But, and get this, not only is he American, he's a Texan. Are you kidding? And he started out middle class. So, man, we have a lot in common. And so it's really easy for me to love Lance Armstrong, or at least it was easy for me to love Lance, because he's in the same group. He's one of my peeps. And I mean, and man, he was my hero. He defeated cancer. And after he defeated cancer, he won the Tour de France, which is this 3-week bicycle race around France. He won it 7 times. So he was my hero. There was only one small problem. He was a Protestant, but he wasn't a believer. So you can go back 6, 7 years ago and look at my spiritual journals. And every day I prayed for Lance Armstrong. Lord, what a powerful witness he would be. Lord, call him to yourself. But then he moved from people I love to people I hate. Because 6, 7 years ago, he did an interview with Oprah. And he confessed that all of those rumors that he had doped, that he had taken drugs, that he had cheated in every single Tour de France race, and every race he ever rode in, he cheated. And boom, he went off the good list. And he became, for me, a despicable. Overnight. Now, why'd that happen? Because, well, he fit the same profile as me, but then he hurt me. So then he went into the despicable list, see. And so he became a despised person. Not just for me, but I would be willing to bet for our entire culture. He is a despicable. Because he hurt so many people with his hypocrisy and his lying. So, you can go back to my journals, and beginning about 6 years ago, I quit praying for Lance. And I haven't prayed for him since. A despicable, just like Matthew. So it's real easy for me to hate. Right? Now the second step is we recognize the people we hate. We recognize our enemies. We recognize our despicables, and we demonize them. So anytime Lance does anything, I just say, that dog bite. He's just, he is lower than snake's hips. I just cannot, he's just, what a dirty dog. And every time I hear something negative about him, it goes into the filing system. And sometimes, when I don't have anything else to do, I'll just review how despicable he is. I just demonize him, and I get such joy perverse joy of fondling these hatreds of mine, of these despicables. But there's a third step, and this is really important. The third step is when we do hear good things about these people, it can be a group. Democrats hate Republicans, Republicans hate Democrats, whites hate blacks, blacks hate whites, rich hate poor, poor hate rich. It can be groups, but it can be individual people. When we hear something good about the group or the person, we minimize it. And how do we do that? Well, I can tell you how I do it. I question their motives. Yeah, Lance gave so much money to this charity, but he only did it to look good. And I just reinforce my hatred by minimizing anything good that the despicable does. So now you know how to hate. And we can have enemies. We can have despicables in our neighborhood. We can have despicables at work. We can have despicables in our families. We can have despicables even in the church. It's real easy to hate. But there's one big problem. If we claim to be followers of Jesus, there's one big problem with being such good haters. There's one big problem I have. And it's my least, so I'm going to share with you, my least favorite passage in the Bible. I'm not going to say I hate it, right? Because it's a little bit cloudy, it can cloud up a little bit, and I'm afraid of being struck by lightning. But I won't say I hate it, but it's my least favorite passage. I'm going to share it with you. So this is actually in Luke 6. Love your enemies. Now, Paul didn't say this. Moses didn't say this. Peter didn't say this. Doggone it, Jesus said this. The boss said this. Love your enemies. And to make it worse, he doesn't say pretend to love your enemies. Fake love with your enemies. Be civil to your enemies. He doesn't say that. He says love them. And the Greek word for love here is godly love. Agape. Ouch. And not only that, he tells us how he wants us to love our enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. And pray for those who despicably use you. Now, this is Rick's International Version. See, I translated this myself. Right? So, pray for those who despicably use you. Are you kidding? I have to pray? I have to do good? I have to bless? And I even have to pray for those who are despicable? Who hurt me? Who use me? Who abuse me? Man, that's tough. That's really, really hard. Can I just hate a little bit? No. So I want to know how, I know how to hate. I'm really good at it. I'm very experienced in that. But I want to know how to hug. How to hug. So I've got a list. So the first thing, how to hug. And the question is answered by looking at the life of Jesus, because not only did he teach us to love our enemies, he actually did it. He actually did it. So how did he do it? Well, first of all, he identified the Imago Dei. Now that's that's kind of fancy, Imago Dei. It's not even Greek or Hebrew, it's just Latin. But it's, hopefully you're sufficiently impressed. But it's Latin, but it's for a very significant biblical doctrine. And it means the image of God. And we believe doctrinally that everyone, the good people and the bad people, the heroes and the villains, and the despicables, hold the image of God. We are all fearfully and wonderfully made. Now, we may not like that. We may not act like it. We might not look like it. But even the despicables in our lives bear the image of God. They are of infinite worth. What's the next step? Go to the next step. Now, Jesus, now this is a whole sermon right here. I'm going to do you a favor, and I'm not going to preach on this. All right? I'm just going to drop this on you. So because the people who hurt us, the people who are not like us, the people who are different or angry or abusive are made in the image of God, we have to transform our anger toward them and our fear toward them into grace. That's what Jesus did. Remember Jesus hanging on the cross? And hanging on the cross, and he looks at the Roman soldiers who are gambling over his clothing. And he remembers just a few hours ago, they were torturing him and beating him and mocking him and spitting on him. He looks at them. Then he looks up at the crowd, and they're way in the back, sitting like they're sitting in a football game, cheering the winning team and booing the losing team. The other team. He sees these religious leaders, the pastors, the Sunday school teachers, the evangelists, the Christian conference speakers. They're sitting back there and they're mocking him because their plans had succeeded. See, the Sanhedrin plotted to remove Jesus. He was such a great threat to their position and power. And they're there, and they're mocking him. They're saying, he could save others. Let's see him save himself. Yeah. Like we sit and cheer and boo and mock at a football game. That's what they were, just spectators. He sees them. And even one of the thieves on the cross with him is mocking him. You saved others. Why don't you save yourself? And by the way, save me too. And he's looking at all of these despicables, all of these enemies, literal, murdering enemies. And guess what he says? He says a prayer. Father, forgive them. Father, forgive them. Now, he wasn't just being religious. You know? He really meant this. And he even gives us and the Father why they should be forgiven. Because they don't know what they're doing. Listen, Jesus wasn't writing a devotional guide. He was in the middle of a torturous, slow, miserable, anguishing death. The word excruciating comes from the same root word as crucifixion. So this is really Jesus. And he's saying, forgive them, Lord, because they just don't know what they're doing. If they knew what they were doing, they wouldn't have anything to do with my death. The Romans, the Sanhedrin, the thief. But Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus took his anger and his fear and had the Father transform it into grace. Now here's the bad news. We can't do that. In your own power, in your own energy, in your own motivation, you cannot do this. So you have to let your anger and your fear go and ask God to replace it with grace. Becky's so good at that. I'll be griping about someone. Please don't talk to her after the service. Right? I'll be griping about someone. They did this and they did that. And she is so gracious. She said, well, honey, maybe this is what's going on under the covers. Maybe this is what's happening. Maybe there's a bigger picture here. Maybe let's give some grace. Let's give some empathy. Let's give some understanding. Oh, okay. Oh, well. I'm very not so gracious myself. But she's right. And she's encouraging me to transform my anger and fear, which is at the base of all our despicables, into grace. 2 more, and I'm done. Let's go to the next one. Now, I know what you're saying. Rick, what about justice? This kind of sounds like you're a snowflake, Jesus was a snowflake. He just everyone is love and peace and flowers and birds singing. But this is a hard, cruel world, and people really do awful, terrible things. Well, and Jesus would agree with you. They do awful, terrible things. But he loved the sinner. Why? Because of number 1. He loved the sinner, but he hated the sin. He hated the sin. And he spoke against it, and he taught against it, and he encouraged others to enforce the law. But he never hated the sinner. Now, you've heard this before. We know it. I just don't do it. Don't do it. But number 1 helps us with number 3. And then finally, the final way on how to hug is we remember that we've been hugged. And who hugged us? God. God in Jesus Christ on that cross loved us first, when we were despicable. So how can we do any less? How can we do any less than to hug the despicable in our life? To love the villains and not just the heroes. I got one last parable. And you're not going to believe who came up with this parable. Go to the next slide for me, Andrea. So here's a parable from Lance Armstrong. Now, he didn't know it was a parable. He was just relating a story that had happened to him. But last month, he came out with there was a podcast where the moderator of the podcast interviewed Lance Armstrong. And so Lance told this story. At the very end of his interview, he said, last year, summer of 2007, my company was sponsoring a cycling event in Denver, Colorado. And so I went up there, kind of make an appearance and to help my organization with the sponsorship. And so the day of the cycling event occurred, I went out, I was on the corner waiting for an Uber to pick me up and take me to the event. And across the street from where I was a restaurant. And the restaurant had a patio. And people were there eating and drinking, talking, laughing. And one person saw me across the street. And he said, hey, Lance. And Lance said, this happens to me all the time. Yeah, hey, how you doing? Good to see you, buddy. And then the guy stood up. And he cupped his hands over his mouth. And he said, bleep you. Bleep you! And he said it over and over again. And Lance was stunned. No one had ever treated him like this before. And then everyone in the porch stood up and said over and over, bleep you, bleep you, bleep you. Well, by that time, the Uber had arrived. He jumped in the back seat and took off. And he said, I was shaken. I mean, I was literally shaking. I'd never experienced this hate before. He said, now, there was a day when I would have run across the street, jumped over the railing, and started swinging. But I didn't do that. But I had to do something. I had to do something. So in the back seat of the car, of the Uber, I pulled out my phone, and I called the restaurant. And I asked for the manager. And I explained to the manager what had just happened, just like I explained it to you. And he was mortified. He was apologetic. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Armstrong. Well, I just don't know what I can do. And he said, well, this is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to do. Here's my credit card information. I want you to take my credit card and pay for everyone who's sitting in that patio, pay for their food. And I want you to pay for their drink, whatever they're drinking. Then I want you to go to the patio and tell them what I did, that their lunch was on me. But then tell them, I get it. I understand. In my parable, the crowd on the patio is us. It's us. Maybe we don't know Jesus. Maybe we know about him, but we don't follow him. And so we go through life saying, bleep you, and Lance is God in this parable. Because some of us are Christians. We are Christians, but there's some areas in our lives where we're in the patio and we're standing up and we're saying to Jesus, bleep you. This is my area. Hands off. And Jesus says, I get it. I understand. Because I was right there with you. And I paid the price. As horrible as it was, to bring you back. To pay off the debt you owe. Let's pray.